Sato Kenichi had spent years building a quiet, ordinary life. His routine was predictable, his apartment unremarkable, and his job uninspiring. But it was safe. It was controlled. The ghosts of the past were locked away, so deeply buried he hardly thought about them anymore, except for the dreams. They weren't nightmares, not exactly, just flashes of things he couldn't quite remember but couldn't fully forget. Shadows, faint voices, the sound of someone crying. He never made sense of them when he woke, but they left him unsettled. When Yamamoto Ryuichi moved into the apartment next door, Sato didn't think much of it. Ryuichi was polite, soft-spoken, and oddly familiar, but Sato couldn't place him. They exchanged pleasantries in the hall, sometimes shared a drink in the evening. Ryuichi had this way of asking questions about Sato's past, about his old university days, that made him feel exposed. "Do you ever think about the people you went to school with?" Ryuichi asked once, swirling his drink casually. "The ones you left behind?" Sato shrugged. "Not really. That was a long time ago." Ryuichi smiled, but something about it didn't sit right. Some memories don't fade so easily. Sato brushed it off. Just another weird conversation. Nothing more. But then the messages started. They came from unknown numbers, untraceable email addresses, random unsettling phrases like, "You were always the one in control, weren't you?" Or, "Some sins can't be forgotten." At first, Sato ignored them. Probably just spam, right? But they kept coming, and they became more personal. "Do you remember what you did to Kubota?" Sato's stomach twisted. He hadn't heard that name in years. Kubota. A ghost from a past he'd long since buried. That night the dreams came back, clearer than ever. It started in high school, but university was where things got worse. Sato wasn't alone in this. He was part of a group, a pack of boys who found amusement in tearing down the weakest link, and Kubota had been the weakest link. He was quiet, awkward, the kind of kid who kept to himself, never fought back. He'd been an easy target. At first it was just small things, pranks, mocking him in class, snatching his books, calling him names. But the group's cruelty escalated. They'd lock him in the school gym overnight, strip him naked and dump water on him in the winter, or force him to eat scraps off the cafeteria floor while everyone watched and laughed. The worst days were when they'd take him to the bathroom, shove his head into the toilet and flush. Kubota never cried, not at first, but they broke him down slowly until the tears came freely. Sato could still hear Kubota's muffled sobs when they pressed his face into the cold, filthy porcelain. It had been a game for them, testing how far they could push him before he snapped, and they'd pushed too far. Far enough that another boy, Harada, had tried to intervene. He wasn't much stronger than Kubota, but he had a sense of justice. Harada had begged them to stop, stepping in when no one else would. They'd humiliated him too, dragged him up to the roof one day as part of the game. That was the day everything fell apart. Sato didn't know exactly how it happened, but he remembered Harada standing at the edge, looking down, then turning back to Kubota. There had been a desperate plea in his eyes. Then he jumped. Sato had been hospitalized after the incident. Therapy, medication, selective amnesia. They'd told him it was better to forget, so he had. He'd wiped Kubota and Harada from his memory, resumed university a year later, and pretended nothing had ever happened. But Kubota hadn't forgotten. When Sato confronted Ryuichi, Kubota, everything unraveled. Kubota didn't deny it. His calm facade crumbled as he spoke, revealing the years of torment he'd endured, alone and broken. "You got to live a normal life," Kubota said, his voice cold and brittle. "You got to forget. But I've carried it with me every single day. Harada's face, the way he screamed before he fell. It's been in my head for years. And you just moved on like nothing ever happened." Sato couldn't meet his eyes. "We were just kids. We didn't know." Kubota's face twisted into something ugly. "Don't give me that crap. You knew exactly what you were doing. You wanted to see me suffer. You enjoyed it." Sato had no answer. Because Kubota was right. Back then, he had enjoyed it. Watching Kubota break had made him feel powerful. They'd all felt powerful, feeding off the fear and misery they inflicted. But now, standing face to face with the man they had destroyed, Sato didn't feel powerful. He felt small, ashamed, afraid. Kubota didn't stop with words. He took everything from Sato. One by one, the pieces of Sato's carefully constructed life were stripped away. His job, gone after an anonymous email claimed he'd been involved in embezzlement. His friends distanced themselves after they started receiving strange messages about Sato's past. His landlord began threatening eviction after complaints about suspicious activity. Kubota dismantled Sato's life brick by brick until there was nothing left but the memories he'd tried so hard to forget. The final blow came when Kubota lured him back to the university rooftop, the same place Harada had died. Kubota didn't need to push him. He didn't even need to tell Sato what to do. Standing there, looking down at the pavement below, it all became clear. This was where it had started. This was where it had to end. "You always thought you were better than us," Kubota said, his voice eerily calm. "But you're not. You never were." Sato stepped closer to the edge. His mind swirled with fragments of memories, Harada's broken body, Kubota's screams, his own cruel laughter. He had tried to lock it all away, but now it was all he could see. "I'm sorry," Sato whispered, but the words felt hollow, too late, too meaningless. Kubota watched, his expression unreadable. "Sorry doesn't change anything." Sato looked down again. The ground seemed impossibly far away, yet somehow so close. Maybe Kubota was right. Maybe this was the only way to atone. His legs felt heavy, his chest tight. The weight of guilt crushed him, suffocating him. There was no escaping it, no running from the past. It was always there, lurking just beneath the surface, and now it had come for him. When Sato stepped off the edge, Kubota didn't react. He simply stood there, watching as the man who had tormented him for years disappeared into the void. For a moment, Kubota expected to feel something. Relief, closure, maybe even satisfaction. But all he felt was emptiness. The same emptiness that had consumed him for so long. Revenge hadn't fixed anything. It hadn't made the pain go away. But by the time he realized that, it was too late.